What happens when a teenage medical prodigy grows up to redefine surgery, brain health, and the future of patient care? Welcome to Industry Ignited, the podcast where we uncover the stories of innovators and disruptors reshaping the industrial and medical landscapes. I'm your host, Dr. Leanne Aguilar, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Peter Bonutti, a powerhouse surgeon, inventor, professor, and entrepreneur who has spent his career redefining what's possible in medicine. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I loved learning a little bit about your story. So tell me again. I know you had an interesting start. You started as a teenager, really, long before most people can even drive. You were starting medical school. How did that experience shape your mindset about learning and innovation? And I mean, just tell me your story.
Sure. So I guess it really starts, my parents were immigrants from Europe, so they had this natural drive to push things along. And when I was younger, it was a scholarship. We had 6 kids. My parents didn't have much money as my dad was a college professor. And so at the third year of my high school, private school, the scholarship ran out. And so it was more expensive for me to continue at high school than to go to college. So my parents, when I was 15, had me applying to colleges. I got full scholarships at a few schools, ended up going to the University of Chicago, where my parents told me that I either have to be a priest or be a physician, neither of which I knew much about. But I said, I don't want to be a priest, that's for sure. So I fumbled my way into medicine, started school early when I was 16 and graduated when I was 19 and moved forward from there. So.
Wow. Right. So super young. And I think you said you were small at the time too. You hadn't, fully grown, become an adult.
I was 4'9" and 90 pounds when I went to college, but it was inferiority complex for sure. But made me work harder, I think, and kind of changed my perspectives on things. But it was all positive, even though it was tough at the time. Looking back, I think it gave me drive. It gave me reason to work harder and to look outside the box at the way people treat each other. And then that taught me into medicine how to look at medicine from patients and individuals' perspective rather than from physician or hospital perspective. So I think overall taught me quite a bit.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And so you actually went away to school. So you had to grow up fast and you weren't living in the same town with your parents anymore. And so you really had to learn how to pave your way and persevere is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the University of Chicago was in the middle of the ghetto on the south side of Chicago. They had more police there than anywhere in the country, including around the White House.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was really dangerous to get off campus. So we were really stuck. I moved from Cleveland, where my parents lived, to Chicago. And growing up there in the inner city was quite unique, let's put it that way. But you work hard, you find things to do, you find relationships, had some fun. But mostly it was all about work and trying to graduate. One of the funny statistics was at the University of Chicago, only 25% of the students that started finished in 4 years. So in my class, I was one of only 25% that graduated in 4 years on time.
Yeah.
So it was tough, but it taught me a lot.
And you mentioned that you wanted to go into business initially. Is that right? But your parents insisted on the medical track.
It was, they said, you're going to medicine. So I said, whatever. I tried to leave a couple of times and transfer out of Chicago, and my parents said, no way. So it's okay. It's, I listened to them and led me to maybe want to do both, not just be a physician, but also a little bit of an entrepreneur, I guess.
Yeah, right. No, and your path's been extraordinary, from surgeon to inventor and CEO. And you mentioned it started, though, in a small town. What drove you to stay in Illinois and build a world-class research and surgical center in Effingham?
Well, when I finished my residencies, I won a number of awards to travel around the world. And when I was working, I had a chance to learn from a orthopedic surgeon, a simple guy named Steffi, small town in Pennsylvania. And he started just on his own in a small hospital, building and designing technology that revolutionized spine surgery called intrapedicular fixation. I worked with him, and he had a small research facility, and I was able to study and learn how you can, on your own, if you're willing to spend the time, put your own money and effort to build technology. So I was intrigued with the concept of building a research facility that would allow me to do more product development. Because back,
Mm-hmm.
almost 40 years ago now, everybody did research. They think you're in a lab with, with beakers and trying to mix chemicals together. And we said,
Yeah.
no, I want to develop products. And so that's what drove me. And I had a chance to buy his research facility. And with that, buying the research facility, I didn't have any funds, obviously finishing residencies, fellowship. So this small town, despite having like 10 academic offers from Stanford and Emory on down,
Yeah.
the small town countersigned my notes, and that's why I moved to small town Illinois. And it's actually been very, very positive for me because it allowed to take the capital that I made out of my medical practice and move it into the research and development facility directly to do things that I thought were important or relevant.
So you were given the resources and the funding to really move into research and development in a way that was powerful and gave you the freedom to innovate, which you have, I know.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I
To a
started with
large
one
degree.
machinist that I bought on board, and we grew that now to a staff that includes mechanical, electrical, computer scientists. We have regulatory affairs, a small patent group. And so we can build things pretty much from A to Z in terms of early technology and development. And then we usually license things very early stage out. So you don't see a
Yeah.
lot of things with my name on it, but we've impacted a lot of different industries in the medical device space.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, I mean, with medicine, you weren't just treating the person, but you were developing the tools that could help treat the people more effectively and more efficiently.
Some of it was developing techniques that allow you to do it, and then developing instrumentation and then the implants that allowed you to take that to the next step. Again, not basic research, but applied research. And we focused initially on orthopedics, which was my specialty, and then evolved out into other particular spaces where we saw there was problems or needs. Our focus or goal was really to look at what patients' perspective was. What do the patients really want out of their medical care, as opposed to 30, 40 years ago, it was everything about what the doctors, the hospital, they would tell you what to do. They would demand certain issues. And I said, look, at medicine is we're delivering a product, and the product has to be directed toward what people are asking me about or care about. And
Yeah.
so we started with looking at from patients' perspective, and I think it's been very valuable. And I think medicine has changed quite a bit now, reaching in those directions, saying, hey, patients are first. We've got to figure out what they want, what they need, not what's best for hospitals, doctors, and focus really on what's going to help patients. So, cutting edge on that a little bit, but we're proud of the fact that we've made quite an impact in those spaces.
Okay. And so it's really taking patient feedback and input and letting that lead the innovation and drive their influence. What types of like instrumentation or patents would you say came directly from patient feedback?
Okay. So for example, minimally invasive surgery. People have started with arthroscopic and endoscopic surgery when I was a resident, and started to look at how we can make smaller incisions, approach patients so you have less pain, faster recovery, more cosmesis. Patients have better functional returns to more normal activity. So we look at this and say, how do we apply this then? At this stage, early stage, when we came in, it was all about how you can remove damaged tissue. But the next phase was how you implant technologies into the body and say, how can you sit there and repair tissue? How can you sit there and do technologies like cartilage grafting, joint replacements, spine surgery, and do these through downsized, smaller incisions, better instrumentation, things that are not only more cosmetic, but also allow faster recovery, less pain. Started to look at what really patients want. And we changed that in a number of different spaces. So my first were implants that were looking at ways to fix rotator cuffs and tissue repair by looking at things called suture anchors, allow you to repair tissue to bone through small portals. And then we applied those technologies to vascular surgery with expanding access devices, so you can make a small incision, stretch out the incision to a larger incision, put instruments and implants through, and then close that, collapse that back down. Then from there, we phased that up to starting to look at knee replacements, which became one of my expertise. And so you say, well, how do we need, these 12-inch incisions that patients are in the hospital for a week and, they can't walk for 2 days. We evolved that into techniques and instruments that allowed us to do these through smaller incisions. And now patients go home the same day and they're walking full weight bearing within an hour and a half of surgery.
Wow.
Taking that, then the next level is how do you add robotics and a high level technology. So we were some of the first, and we were the first to really develop robotic systems for knee replacements and devolve those technologies as time on. So it's an evolution looking at how you take these technologies that are known, for example, in industry, and how we apply them in the medical space and say, how can we improve the patient's quality of care and the patient's perspectives on care and optimize the efficiencies as well as the precision of the surgical procedures, which has evolved now, and now it's pretty state of the art. But we started this in the early 90s and have progressed that over time.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. Not only is it less invasive, so causing less damage, to the body while you're doing the procedure, but they heal faster, and it's probably a quicker procedure as well for the most part.
The important part though really is, how do patients? Why would you take someone that is 80 years old, they need a knee replacement, and they're going to live till 85, and you're going to take a year to get their recovery? It's taking such a large section of their life and saying, hey, we have to change this. We have to look at how we can optimize their recovery, their return. So these are things we look at and say, how can we develop technologies, procedures, pain medication approaches to make these people's lives better?
Yeah, so improving overall quality of life for the patient. Now, looking back, what moment or mentor most influenced the way you think about solving problems, would you say?
I would say the very first individual is Art Steffi. He was just a simple orthopedic surgeon. He was a hand surgeon. His partner was screwing up spinal procedures, and he went and invented something called pedicular fixation in spinal plates and rods that allowed you to fuse the spine where patients had areas of instability and problems. So he taught me that, you can innovate, you can listen to what people need, because his partner would fix the patient's leg pain, but they'd have terrible back pain. And he said, well, I've got to solve this problem. And it just made me realize that you can make an impact. Even if you're a single physician in the middle of nowhere, you can do something and make an impact if you're willing to put your time, your money, your effort into it. And so he taught me quite a bit. And then I took that and started saying, hey, if I can do this, if he can do it, I can do it as well. And
I love that. Yeah.
It was exciting to me. So Art unfortunately passed away, but he ended up revolutionized spine surgery. And I think, he gets very little credit for it because he never wrote a lot of research papers, but he sold his company to DePuy. It's now DePuy Spine, Johnson & Johnson. And, he made $350 million, which he then donated quite a bit back to charity and things, but a real impact in showing what you can do with your time, your effort, your capital.
Right. And then he inspired you, which, has led then to a whole slew of other innovations. And from what I understand, you've been granted over 500 patents and developed more than 700 licensed products to date. What's your process for identifying a problem worth solving?
Mostly when I look and talk to people, my patients were first, where I'd sit and listen to what their perception of the problem was and the difficulties they faced in terms of traditional care that they had either been consulted about, advised about, or had seen going through their family members. So I listened to people is the most important. And then I branched out from just orthopedics, where my particular interest, into other areas where really, patients have real concerns about some technologies and or recovery. So, for example, I developed a small product that's made an impact for open heart surgery. You have saphenous veins. You have to harvest the vein to use that for the heart graft when you're bypassing. Well, they'd have to make these big incisions, harvest the grains. We developed a small expanding access device and a balloon that would dissect around the saphenous vein, so you can make two small incisions, harvest the vein, remove the vein. So instead of having this 2-foot-long incision to harvest your saphenous vein out of your leg to fix your open heart, we developed that through a couple small incisions. So now you barely even notice that. But those are the things that really bugged patients and said, how can we make, although that's not a huge issue in its own way, it made a difference. And so, again, one of my smaller, earlier patents and technologies, but it's evolved around listening to people and trying to identify where their problems exist, where they have, and then can we develop some kind of technological solution that may make a difference.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, just really, really listening, really just understanding the core care, somebody's pain points, and then just taking it seriously and seeing what you can do to solve the problem.
Sometimes we don't have answers, but I would take the technology, I would listen, then I would take it, and I have a team of engineers and electrical and computer and some mechanical engineers. We tinker with it and try to come up with a number of different solutions, try to come with the next is the least common denominator, I call it, which is always coming back to the simplest, easiest solution, and those tend to be the most elegant, and find out how we can deliver these to actually make an impact in patient care. So not theoretical. We really wanted to bring something to the table that adds particular value.
Right. So has there ever been a circumstance where, you're solving a problem and you end up solving a different problem? Or you're not able to solve that problem, but then later are able to solve it through a series of other innovations.
So that actually probably is a good intro to what one of my biggest interests right now, which is the Relieve, which is a technology that allows us to treat cluster headaches, which people call a suicide headaches. People want to kill themselves, about 74% of people. It is
Wow.
the most painful issue that you can address in medicine. I saw technology that was developed and went into receivership because they didn't have the right funding, the right management, the right direction. And I said, look, we need to bring this technology back online, because it was such a big deal. Even though it's a small number of patients, maybe 500,000 patients in the US are affected by it. It's not huge numbers, but these are just terrible, catastrophic problems. So I looked at that, looked at the technology, figured what was actually going on. In other words, why did this technology called a pulsante system, which is a little micro neural chip that you would put inside your mouth to what's called the sphenopalatine ganglion, and why was that technology curing these cluster headaches? And then I sat there and said, I understand why, because they're able to vasoconstrict and shrink the blood vessels in the brain that are causing these severe cluster headaches, because they were unilateral. The face would flush, eyes would droop, you'd sweat, and your eyes would start tearing and crying, and the pain was catastrophic. Then I realized that technology allowed us to potentially treat what's called the blood-brain barrier, which is the single biggest problem we have in medicine today. And that is being able to deliver drugs, biologics, pharmacologics into the brain so that you can have neurorestoration, potentially tissue healing from the brain. So for example, you have a stroke, you have an injury to the brain, the tissue's dead, you think it can never come back, when in fact that's really not true. The problem is that the blood-brain barrier only allows very small particles to get into the brain, which limits the pharmacologic and biologic applications we can apply. If we can open or stretch out that blood-brain barrier on a demand basis, so that when we're delivering biologics, pharmacologics, we can open this up on demand and then close it on demand, we could potentially change that. So that's what drove me to this. I said, this treatment for cluster headache, I said, I can move this into a whole different scenario where I can change neurodegenerative disorders, memory loss, Alzheimer's, all types of dementia, also earlier stages where people have Parkinson's, that's all on the neurodegenerative side. And in the early stage, when people have cerebral palsy, strokes, other injuries to the central nervous system, we can now don't have to worry in things like Neuralink, where you're bringing an artificial chip and trying to control the brain artificially. Why can't we sit there and allow central nervous system to heal, treat pain, treat other disorders, because we can't deliver drugs, pharmacologics, biologics in the brain. But with this technology, we can, and we can do this on demand, opening and closing the blood-brain barrier on demand. So that to me was the biggest unanswered area, and that ranges everything from pain to memory loss to permanent brain injuries, where then I have to do orthopedic surgery for patients that have cerebral palsy, strokes, injuries where neuromuscular system is compromised, and then we have to do procedures, tendon transfers, fusions, things like this to treat them. So why can't we go back to the basic source? So full circle, I've done basic things, and now we're sitting over saying, let's go to the source of the problem, which is a lot of us within the brain. And I realize it's an access issue. And so if we can create this access, we have some unique opportunities. And that's my next phase of my life.
Fascinating. No, that's super fascinating. I've been in that world. My nephew had a TBI. He was in hit by a
Military
truck, right?
trauma. Yeah, direct trauma,
Right.
one trauma.
Exactly. And so, I mean, before I know it was thought that the brain, can't heal, but now I know neuroplasticity is they're learning more and more that it is.
That's correct.
Very.
But the reason is because your body can't deliver the agents into the brain because of this blood-brain barrier. And if you can, because we can do this in the peripheral body and we can deliver these technologies, but the brain is completely different for one issue. And that's the blood-brain barrier protects the brain. And so you don't want to eliminate it. On the other hand, if you can control access and then turn it on and off on demand, maybe make big changes in biologics, neurorestoration is now within our grasp.
Wow, that's fascinating. Right. Now, I know at Bonutti Technologies, you've built an innovation engine that's powered products for Stryker, Zimmer, Medtronics, and more. What's the secret to turning intellectual property into real-world impact?
Well, the first is to identify a problem you want to solve. You want to take a look at that, say, does it have an impact? The second is then to understand the problem and look if you have some solutions and develop, whether you write research papers, which some people enjoy, or I look at patents as my research papers, and I start to define what the problem is and come up with solutions and lay those down on paper. So really codifying something, because thoughts, ideas are nice, but unless you start to codify them and put them on paper and then start to develop them. So the steps that we look at are identify a problem, come up with some ideas to solve it, codify, put it on paper, and then start to look, can you build real life solutions for this? Come to the least common denominator, simplest solution, build some prototypes, build the devices. And then we don't focus on the marketing, sales, distribution. We focus on getting these technologies in the hands of companies that can use them. So we've done a lot of work early licensing and develop things to other major medical device companies that can do marketing, sales, distribution, because it's really not our forte. It's also not what excites us. What excites us is coming up with the problem, identifying it, and then coming up with solutions. And, let these other companies do what they do best, which is get their salesmen in the field, distributors, market, and promote it. And we'll move on to the next technology, the next product.
Right. So your passion and your strengths lie in that the innovation, the ideas in that early stage development.
And build a team around that helps me with different phases of this. And I think we've been reasonably successful. And unfortunately, things have changed over the last 5 years. There's less capital that's flowing into med tech, med devices, even though it's a really important area.
Mm-hmm.
So we've said we've got to now build small businesses to take the products to market. So that's what's taken us to the next phase. That's why, for example, Relieve, it's its own standalone company. We have to build that up. Once it's on the market, then companies start looking at it. Medicine's changed a bit in that area, but so we have to take it now a step further. But it's still important to continue innovation. So that's part now of the innovation process that's mandated almost to get your technology to market. And then the bigger companies will come talk to you.
Right. And why do you think that changed?
I think it's I call it the J&J model. Companies that have expertise in marketing, selling, and distribution can de-risk technologies by, rather than developing them in-house, which takes time, cost, and the FDA regulatory pathway is very, very difficult. They sit there and find more value in taking a technology that's developed and on the market. So we've already gone through the regulatory process, already have some initial sales, bring it in under their sales, marketing, distribution network, and they do much better. And that seems to be what most of the medical device companies have headed for, because it decreases the risk, decreases the costs to them. And then they'll pay a massive premium for these already developed technologies, but that means that they have to do less work in-house.
Right, exactly. And they're minimizing the risk, like you're saying. And I've heard that quite a bit from others as well. And now, we were talking before about how you pioneered the minimally invasive surgeries decades before it became mainstream. What obstacles did you face introducing such disruptive concepts to traditional medicine?
Well, I remember one of the early innovators, or one of the early professors and leaders, let's say, in shoulder surgery. I did a lot of work on rotator cuffs and instabilities and things like this early on. And he would sit there, and I'll never forget the quote that arthroscopy, or minimally invasive surgery, is the tool of the devil, meaning that we're doing unnecessary surgeries, or excessive surgeries, maybe is another word, and that we couldn't do things through these small portals or small incisions. But older surgeons, they could not, that's not how they trained, so they didn't understand these techniques or technologies, and they didn't want to change. So there was an uphill barrier in terms of looking at these new technologies, taking surgeons that were doing things quite well and saying, hey, but we could do them better. And they're like, no, this is how we do it. This is the right way to do it. So there's a strong resistance in medicine and surgery, even to this day, about changing or applying new technologies. So you go up against that, and there was some uphill battles about getting it. You have to publish it, lectures, show that there adds value. And so over the rotator cuff, as an example, that's the standard of care, is doing everything through endoscopic surgery, arthroscopic surgery, small incisions, repairing with anchors and fasteners, and all these minimally invasive techniques. Ran through the same thing with total hips and total knees. We did this. Why do you want a small incision? I want to see everything all at once. It's more accurate. It's better. I said, but the patients are in the hospital for a week. They're in agony. And what taught me was, one of my representatives went and had to go to a surgeon to have his knee replacement done. He was 42 years old. And he had and the surgeon did a great job, but he had a 12-inch incision. The patient ended up dying because he had to take so much medicine overnight, so many narcotics, because he was in such severe pain that they essentially overdosed him, opioid overdose, stopped bleeding or breathing, and he ended up passing away. And I was like, whoa, this is not something. This is something that's, we really need to revisit, because it's not. it's not what the patients really care about or want. I mean, yeah, I get a great X-ray, but a great X-ray and a patient doesn't make it, or a patient is agony for a year, I struggled with that. So,
Yeah.
and there's resistance in medicine to change, but unfortunately, you have to persist, and eventually things change. Hopefully, if it adds value to the patients, it makes a difference.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. So, like, really that resistance to change, but how do you tackle that? I mean, how do you get people to um, see that there are other possibilities that are better and that,
It's important. That's why I stay out. I lecture some, I publish some. You have to put this stuff in print. You have to publish research papers on it. You have to go out and essentially convince or show people that these technologies or these things matter or are better. And
Mhm.
you'll find sometimes companies are very receptive to it, and physicians are. Sometimes they're not. And you just have to continue fighting and pursuing them. And with the patents, it's the same. I mean, I've had some patents that I filed 18, 20 years ago that take that long before they get to fruition and some acceptance, which means the
Mhm.
patents are essentially expired by that point. But it just takes time, effort, and you have to keep beating your head against the wall because these things don't happen magically. I mean, in tech space, people write some software, they'll do a chip or something, things change pretty quickly. Medicine isn't like that at all. So there are unique challenges. So it requires persistence, time, effort,
And
and
just educating people, like you're saying, just getting out there, spreading the word. Yeah, like that publishing, I guess there's a place for that too. And because, like we were talking about, I mean, innovation requires risk, but from what I'm hearing, not innovating, just not changing, there's a lot of risk involved there because then, people die. And um, so tell me about moments when a breakthrough has felt more like a breakdown. And what have you learned from that?
Oh, so I believe one of those novel technologies that's ultrasonic welding of plastics inside the human body. So we could take pieces of PEEK, a structural material, in small incisions. I could weld them together to make solid structural units in the body and build this up. So we developed this independently, and we licensed it out to a major company that worked with us so we could fix fractures, for example, putting rods in the bone. And rather than using x-rays and drilling holes through the bone, we could drill a small hole and weld these rods together with small cross links so
Hmm.
that you could fix any type of fracture anywhere by melting these plastics together in the human body in half a second.
Wow.
And because the melting occurred very localized to that right at the interface, you didn't have this bleed off of temperature and heat that could damage the human body. So this ultrasonic welding technology we worked on, we developed it. We got FDA approval. We had intramedullary rods developed for this. And then the company that we licensed it to, and we developed those technologies, sold. And as it sold, the new company put in the back burner and basically shut down the project.
Oh.
We spent probably $10 million and 10 years of our lives. It was very complex to be able to do this, build these welding units that would sense blood fluid inside the body and still get a reproducible bond that would work consistently inside the human body through small incisions and allow you to repair, reconstruct fractures, trauma, spine. And we went in, we got the FDA approvals on all this, and all that stuff was killed because status quo with metal rods and plates people use, they feel that spirit. Metal rods, they break, they have
Right.
what's called corrosion at the interfaces. It's hard to remove. It creates nickel and iron get deposited, especially nickel in the body. Very dangerous. People have severe allergies. They don't even know it because they have fractures and plates and rods in them. We changed that entire paradigm, and yet the technology's sitting there now on the shelf. So, a great project, great technology. And they manufacture these medical products using ultrasonic welding before they put them in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And we can sit there and do this inside the body, and it's been an uphill battle there. So that's one of my greater disappointments because a great technology. We developed all the algorithms, all the hardware and software to do this, and the implants, and it's just sitting on the shelf. So those are on the negative side. On the positive side, some of my technologies have been really exciting, and we didn't finalize the development, but we're early stage. Company recently, Shockwave Medical, and licensed some of my patents that took me 18 years to get a patent approved. But it removed calcium from blood vessels, and we use this and using electroshock wave therapy, we can break up the calcium within the body and then becomes removed through normal biologic processes. And so you can treat. We were looking at it for joints that have something called chondrocalcinosis. Now this is a huge company. It's bought $13 billion, bought by J&J a couple of years ago. We developed initial technology, had some of the first patents on it. But again, interesting, challenging technology. We came up with a very interesting answer applied by another company. We don't get a lot of credit for it, but we are actually the first to work in this space and develop this technology. So those are kind of two extremes. One where we've had minimal involvement in the product, but had the intellectual property and the technology. Other one we develop all the way extreme. So sorry, maybe went off track.
No, that's fascinating. But yeah, that's got to be super frustrating though when you develop a technology and it's very effective and it can go far in helping people, and then it gets shelved. There's not the focus on it or the funding anymore. Is there anything you can do about that? Or once they have the license to the patents, then that's, you just have to wait?
We actually, we continue to innovate. So we have a strong background in ultrasonic welding, ultrasonic therapeutics. Mm-hmm. So we're continuing to work in this space. We have some technologies that we're using for treatment of chronic sinus pain and sinusitis, all the way to using that to treat chronic infections, resistant bacteria, biofilm. So we're still working in those spaces and slowly developing, but it's challenging when you develop something really unique and either somebody else takes it and walks with it or somebody else shuts it down. But as I told you, it's persistence. If you believe and it adds value, I'm going to continue. So we're continuing involved in some of these areas. And sometimes there's offshoots that are valuable, and we're going to continue working on it.
Yeah. So is right now is Relieve your main focus?
We have two companies that I've really spent the most time. One is Relieve, which is this neuromodulation technology, which is mobile, scalable, and you can hopefully treat cluster headaches and migraine headaches as well, but also to look at this for allowing treatment for the central nervous system. And then a second company that I have is really focused on medical therapeutics, where we're using ultraviolet C. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But ultraviolet C is 20 to 320 nanometers, about 250. So you use light source at that frequency. And with that, you can basically kill bacteria, parasites, viruses, fungi, molds. Industry, it's used broadly in HVAC systems and others to get rid of mold and things like this that it goes through air conditioning systems. So people might know about that. But it's very effective for disinfection and treatment. So we developed a number of technologies in the space by utilizing camera systems and sensors so that we can know what we're treating. You can see it in real time. You can see the bacterial reduction, log reduction over time. So we can go from anywhere from log 1, which you might argue is sanitizing stuff, to log 6, which is pharmaceutical reduction. You can see this real time on a camera where you see where it and deliver the proper dose so that you don't overdose or overtreat or untreat, and we can sit there and disinfect. So we developed the first device is actually sold now on Amazon, where we use this where you can carry it with you and mobily disinfect, sanitize anywhere you go. And it's got AI algorithms that allow you, if a hand or a dog or something walks in the way, shuts down, recalculates the dosage. So you can use it on the fly. It attaches to your iPhone and use the computing power of that, all the way now to robots, which will disinfect and treat in the operating room and or surgical suites, to hospital rooms, to any type of airplane where you want to disinfect from one patient or from one group that comes into the other. And now that's being used very broadly in the industry. So we developed dosage control, and first product on the market. People don't understand it, so we're slowly growing with that. But we're developing offshoots that people can use. If you treat things like vegetables, they sit there and decay. Why do they decay in your refrigerator or out in a salad bar? It's because bacteria, viruses. So if you get rid of those and you can treat those, you can improve shelf life as well as decrease the risk for disease transmission. So we think that's a big issue in both consumer space, but also in the medical space. So how we can treat in the operating room, prevent infections and surgery. So again, that's my other big company that we're spending some time and effort, because it has a consumer application as well as medical application.
Oh, very cool. And what was it called again?
It's called UV Seed. So UVCEED.
Okay, fascinating. Okay.
A verb, I guess, but these are things that I look at and say, look at where are our problems. And we popped this up because of COVID. So we bought the consumer product on first because you can disinfect viruses, COVID, and it doesn't have any harmful chemicals. I mean, just a simple thing. People think, wipes and sanitizing chemicals. I'll give you a fact you probably didn't know, but you use a chemical wipe. Do you know how long a Lysol wipe, for example, takes before it allegedly disinfects?
No. How long?
4 minutes. Now, did you know that if the material has to stay continuously wet for 4 minutes to disinfect, and 50% dry with 60 seconds or less.
Mm.
That means you have to apply that wipe 4 times over the same surface area to keep it wet for 4 minutes. And then you have disinfection, allegedly. And it's really
No
not.
way.
And then you can't see what the dosage is. And so then it leaves harmful chemicals. And
Right.
if those chemicals, then you have to wash that down afterwards. Because otherwise, if those chemicals come and you touch them, you go in your mouth, they go across the blood-brain barrier. They can cause central nervous system toxicity. No
Wow.
one understands the chemicals. It's extremely dangerous. People sit there and they just wipe their hands with them, or they put them on tables and then
Yeah.
they drink immediately. They go, you're not sanitized. In fact, you're putting chemicals in your body.
You're poisoning yourself.
That's
Wow.
right. And so that's why I've developed these technologies, because I think they really matter in terms
Yeah.
of day to day. These chemicals are very, very dangerous and people have no idea. And like I said, they think they're disinfectant, wipe it and they immediately eat. And you're like, you're crazy.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And there's no education on that. I mean,
And if you
there's
read the labels on these packages, they deliberately hide the
right.
information. You have to really look on the back, look at the label, and it says, oh,
Yeah.
well, it can sanitize in 15 seconds. But then you really read on the back of the label, it says, no, it takes 4 minutes continuously. You have to continuously keep it wet. They don't tell you that you have to wipe it down 4 or 5 times to keep it continuous. And then you don't know if enough of the chemical is there, because if you
Right.
use it over 2 feet as opposed to 6 inches,
Yeah.
the chemicals spread out. So you have no idea. With our system, you can actually see what you've treated and you know it's, so you have safety, security. With this, you don't know. And then there's no chemicals. Where here you get these chemicals, dogs can pick it up, lick it, animals, it gets in the environment, it goes in the water supply, and you'll see, I promise you that over the next decade, you're going to see major, major issues with all these chemicals and sanitizers, Clorox, Lysol, all these. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's hurting people and no one wants to talk about it.
Right. Now, you've also spoken about the dangers of certain brain interface technologies like Neuralink. From your perspective, then, what is the ethical line innovators must not cross?
Well, the ethical line to me is basically increasing the risk-benefit ratio. In other words, yes, can we do something? But is the risk outweigh the benefits? And the risk of an open surgery into the brain that affects the brain tissue, the dura, the coating of the brain, that creates scarring and may create additional damage, because now you're intracranial with all these procedures, and the risks of that downstream are not insignificant. And you have to look at these and weigh these versus the potential benefit. Now, these people that they're treating with are just massively incapacitated, and they have no hope for the next level. So I understand the rationale for that. But there also are huge, huge risks as people are promised these potential great opportunities for, basically restoring your ability to use your arms or legs or function after a major central nervous system injury. But the challenge is that you're giving people hope potentially, but it's also with a huge risk factor. And the complications downstream are substantial. That's why, as I look at it, I prefer to look at mechanisms that enhance the body's own functionality and see if we can improve it that way. So for our technology, we stay extracranial. We're never in the brain. We stimulate nerves that go to the brain, the autonomic nervous system, the brain. And by controlling that, looking at ways that we can get the body to treat or heal itself, as opposed to sit there and bringing some external device that can be hacked into, that can sit there and cause significant downstream and secondary effects, to say which is the best path to go. And you get companies like Neuralink that get billions of dollars thrown at them because they're treating, obviously the worst of the worst, and there's challenges. When if any of that capital was invested in technologies that have a lower risk benefit ratio and potential greater broad value, but the challenge is, unless you can market and sell and get people to invest in these, it becomes problematic. And so the ethical issues to me are not to cause that risk benefit ratio to get out of whack, where you're very risky. Yeah, it's great. And I learned this early on. This person I told you, Steffi, that did spinal surgery, he was making stuff in his machine shop, sterilizing and sticking in patients the same day. I was like, whoa, you can't do that. He did it for almost a decade and got away with it. You look at that and you go, that's not the way we should be attacking this. And I almost feel like, some of these technologies like that, you haven't looked at the downsides enough to sit there and say they're adding real value to patients. So again, challenging, of interest and of value, but I think there are probably better solutions and simpler solutions.
Yeah. Okay. So you're really focusing on solutions, though, that help the body heal itself, that encourage the body to take over so it's safer? And is
Yes,
that your...
get away from implants that have substantive risks, and look at ways that we can use the body's own mechanisms and the own and biologic processes to heal, rather than looking at technological systems that use robotics and all types of integrated chips and circuits to try and sit there and bypass the diseased tissue. Why not try to get the diseased tissue to heal itself and focus there first?
Right.
And I don't think they've spent enough time and money doing that. And I think jumping to this robotic type solution, if you want to call it that, may not be the best option for these patients.
Okay. And so is that what Relieve does then? Is that the
That's our
difference there?
long-term goal, is to try to sit there. And that's what we're simply stimulating the body's own autonomic nervous system, stimulating and then overstimulating. So open and closes to allow access of biologics, pharmacologics to treat central nervous system disorders. In you just simulating the body's own mechanisms, as opposed to try to bring something that's an artificial implant into the body and using that to try to stimulate tissue that's been injured or damaged.
Right.
So I think biologic solutions using own body mechanisms are far superior to doing end stage procedures and accepting the fact that tissue is destroyed and trying to get around that. Why not go and try to treat that tissue and see if you can get neurorestoration? And we're doing that everywhere around the body with stem cells, grafts, all kinds of other things. Why can't we do it in the brain?
Yeah. And so in your opinion, where should human empathy and AI meet in medicine?
Well, those are all very, very difficult issues, because AI has tremendous promise. But one of the biggest challenges with AI, and people aren't looking at, is if the data that they put into the AI is problematic, you're going to end up with problematic solutions that pop out.
Right.
And I can tell you a lot of medical research is quite flawed and changed. So I've done this over my 40-year career now, looking at research papers, publications that people cite and quote everywhere as being gospel. When you look at them, they're really flawed. They have bad data. And yet people are building a house of cards on data that's flawed. And that's the big problem with AI that I see, is people are throwing data. You don't know where the data comes from, and you have no way to cross-reference and go back. At least I can read a research paper and say, hey, I don't believe that, or this is flawed. I don't believe this set of data. But with AI, you don't have that ability. It's coming you with conclusions, and you don't know what the basis of those conclusions are focused on. And the data underlying it is hidden, or you can't assess the data clearly that they're building these assumptions or conclusions on. So that's the danger of AI.
That is so true. I mean, I really hadn't thought about that before, because when we're like in research, let's say if I'm going and I'm writing a paper, I'm citing all of my sources. I am digging backwards, but I am investigating. I mean, I am building on a sound foundation. I have the opportunity to, not include certain research, because just like
when I
what you
read
said.
your paper, I will be able to look at that and say, well, I'm not sure that reference is correct. I can go look at it.
Exactly.
But with AI, all that's hidden. And I've read some other interesting articles where the companies that are using AI, currently language-based AI, where they're taking words and they're putting them together. Who are these people that are putting and feeding this data in? And are they feeding all the data, some of the data? What is this data that they're sticking in? I mean, it has tremendous value. But the biggest challenge I have is no one can come back and look at the sources, the raw source that these AI engines are creating conclusions off of.
So
and that
true.
becomes the biggest problem, I believe. And I think we'll see that manifested further and further. I do patent searches. I just started tinkering with AI and looking at them. 50% of the time, the data is completely wrong. And I can go back, so I can look at the patents. I go back to them and read them, and they're absolutely not what the AI engines are telling you in their conclusions. And I'm wondering, what is it like for all other areas of research, medicine, hard sciences? And I think we are taking real risks by accepting what AI tells us without knowing the base literature and being able to go back and question it, look at it.
Absolutely. That's super dangerous. And there's not that accountability or transparency if you're not able to go back and cite the references and make sure that it's valid data, because a lot of times, I mean, there's resources that we end up not using, references that aren't valid, that become invalidated over time because other studies then prove them,
But look in medicine, stupid things like, let's take margarine. Remember butter's bad for you. You have to have margarine. We're going to put these and then all of a sudden you turn full circle and go, well, this stuff's garbage. You're not supposed to be. This is actually more dangerous than taking butter or olive oil, whatever.
Yeah.
We see this, and yet unless you knew the data. And so the transparency of AI is where I see real problems. I see real advantages. I mean, I use it. I'm intrigued with it. But it's like reading an abstract of a research paper and then assuming everything in the abstract is accurate.
Right.
I've
Without
rejected people.
even knowing what the references are.
No, I'll give you a recent. I recently reviewed a paper on knee replacements because obviously I know quite a bit in that space. And I rejected the paper 3 times. And they went ahead and published the paper anyway, even though the data, everything was flawed. It was because, well, I was told by the commission on knee replacements that we have to publish this. I said, but the data is flawed. Don't publish it. They went ahead and published it over my objections 3 times. And now it's in peer review literature, and peer review literature is supposed to be honest and valid. That's just one example. This is recent. I can give you many, many others where publications occur, everybody references them, and the core papers that this built on are just absolute garbage yet. And so that's just a small microcosm. Imagine now AI, where they're accumulating massive amounts of data. And if one of those data points is off, you're going to be making a lot of conclusions, or at least people are going to draw inferences. And that's where it comes in the problem with oncology treatments, some cutting edge things. You may be putting people at risk over that.
Yeah, and then it gets published, and then it's foundational for other research when it's not even right. So then exactly, it's built on
it's the margarine model.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Peter, you're not just a surgeon and innovator. You're also a father of 6.
Yes, ma'am.
How has being a parent shaped your approach to designing safer, smarter health technologies like the UV seed that you were talking about?
So, for example, with the kids, they can take this device and it's safe for them. They stick their hand in, they point it at their eye, it turns off. We have to make sure safety algorithms and everything are bid. Again, biggest issue is do no harm. If you can help, that's great. But the biggest problem is do no harm. So yes, as I've gotten older and started to look at more from my children's eyes as well, I always try to step back and say, what are they thinking? What is the end user? Could be my children as well. Say, is this safe? Is this effective for them? Should we be doing this? And it allows me to sit there and make changes. So, for example, with my children, we've looked at them. We've actually filed some patents off of ideas that they've had, and we've put their names on and saying, hey, can you identify a problem? What's the solutions? Let's think about this, and let's come up with opportunities that will maybe enhance sports or something that the kids are involved with actively, or school. How do we improve learning? I've got some different AI and some other algorithms that we're looking at to how improve school. Like some kids in the morning, they're really good at studying, and then they sleep in the afternoon. Some kids are great at midnight, and they'll go for 3 or 4 hours. Why?
Yeah, totally.
So we developed some stuff that looks at how do we optimize relative to activity, eating, functional activity, sunlight, whatever. What's the best time for a kid to study? What's the best time for a kid to exercise? What's the best time? And how do you integrate these? So that's one of the newest areas I'm spending a lot of time on, because, schools dump everybody into one big jar and shake it up. So when you say, what do I look at my kids? I look at them. Why is one kid doing better in school than the other one? It's because one kid maybe is not at his best mentally or physically to be at school or learning or reading a book at this time, at this place. Why can't we start to look at educational systems that follow diurnal curves, where patients' cortisol levels are up and they study better here, and cortisol levels are down, they're exhausted, and you try to ram a test down their throat when they're not at a peak, they're not going to do well. And so that's why you see tremendous fluctuations in patients, or not patients, but children's scores. I look at stuff like that and I say, there's a problem. And is there a better way to do it? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's more a question of a question, which is, can we do better?
No, I love that. So yeah, you're looking at your children and listening to them and looking at their differences and seeing how you can personalize patient care, or how you can innovate. So
the educational systems. I'd like
exactly,
my
in
kids
the
to learn
innovation,
better.
and innovate in the educational space even. But that makes complete sense. And I think you're right. If we can personalize the education space more,
We
then
add value. So
add value and potentially create more success for those students who are different, who don't fit into that that
or
traditional
follow that
mold.
into work. If you have a person that's mechanical or technical or physical labor, are there optimal times? So how does an employer use this following up to say, hey, I'm going to have this person do this job at this time because that's when they're best at it, and they'll get the most efficient, most productive employee. Just thinking, and again, coming to kids, looking at people, listening to them and saying, there's some people that work out in the morning, 6 a.m., they're great there. And there's other people that say, I got to work out at 6 p.m. I just know I can't.
Yeah.
How do we sit there and take these basic things and say, how do we optimize patients' lives, their productivities, their efficacy to themselves and to society by saying, hey, we can do better. And
Mhm.
I don't know, that's the way I think. And I don't know if I have solutions to everything, but that's how I start, by looking at a problem and saying, we can do better because these things are disparate. How do we pull them together?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I know a lot of your inventions do bridge that professional and personal world from like infection control, like you were talking about before. How do you decide what ideas to pursue commercially?
That's the biggest challenge. And obviously, you can make some mistakes, but you take these ideas and then you sit there and document them, and then you start to say, hey, are these worth making the investment? Sometimes it's subjective. Sometimes it's going out to talking to other people, say where the market is. But really, it's looking and saying, where is it going to have an impact? And is it worth investing this money, this time, this capital to make an impact? Sometimes we write things just to write, to sit there and say, document this thought process and bring it down on paper. That's less common. What we do is say, look, if this has an impact to society, to medicine, and there's a potential financial return, partially because that funds then the next idea and the next idea. So you grow that. So the market impact is also something that we try to study.
Okay. So you basically like creating a business plan at the beginning and kind of looking at these different aspects and then assessing
Which
whether or
ones you
not,
pursue and which ones
yeah.
don't.
Hmm.
And is it worth spending the time and money patenting something? Is it worth then building a prototype, building a design? And it changes over time. So sometimes you write a patent and it's really not all that relevant, but at least you put it on paper and codified it, and you spend a couple grand. To downstream, when do you build a prototype, when do you build a product, when do you take it to market? Those are all based on markets assessments and
Yeah.
needs. Because they're
Right.
little niche products, they're nice, but they're really going to make an impact.
Awesome. I love that. I teach college and to my marketing management students at a university, and I just went over that chapter. And I love that it's actually, being strategic when it comes to innovation. And I love to hear that it's being put into practice and it actually works. So
Yes.
I will
Some,
report that to them. This is not just like conceptual, this is actually practical. That's awesome.
Agreed.
Now, you've built an empire of innovation while staying deeply rooted in hands-on patient care. What keeps you grounded after so much success?
Well, I think I always look at myself as I'm a surgeon. That's my job. My job is to take that patient individually. Let's say I do a knee replacement. I have to put 100% focus on that patient at that time. And it brings me back to full circle, because I go, look at that comes back again, this risk benefit ratio. Am I doing the right thing for this person at that time that's in their best interest? And linking that, you said family, same thing with my family. Am I doing the right thing for them at this time for their individual needs? And again, it has to be individualized, personalized, but you have to really focus on that person and listen to them. It's always coming back to, I try to take input, talk less, listen more, and
Mm-hmm.
I get something out of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's how you should look at innovation, is the end user, and make sure that you're truly impacting them, that you're solving their problems. And
Yeah.
that's the way I
Yeah.
like to think about things.
I love that. No, I'm going to take that and implement that more into my own life. I say that when it comes to marketing, it's all about communication and listening to our client, or listening to the target audience of the client. That's how you make sure that you're spreading the word and reaching them. So for young inventors and physicians dreaming of making an impact, Peter, what advice would you give them about persistence, purpose, and ethics and innovation, and other than just that listening? What else would you advise?
Well, I do think that if you want to make a change, you want to make innovation, it takes time. It's expensive. It takes time. It takes persistence. You're going to be knocked down. So most importantly is you start by believing in yourself, believing in the problem you identify, that you have a solid solution for it. And then the next is to take that downstream and continue to pursue it, which means you have to put your own time, your own money, your own effort before anyone else will come in and spend any time or money listening to you and or pursuing it to the next level. Too many people stop when they say, oh, I got to put my own money into this. Oh, I got to put my own time. So it's first of all, being willing to commit, and commit means time, money, effort. The second is be persistent. It's extremely rare that you turn on something and all of a sudden 6 months later, you get a home run out of this. This takes years and years to sit there and an idea that you have, develop and nurture it into something that's tangible, that's usable. And so you have to be prepared for this in the long term. Third is that you're always going to have setbacks, whether it's financial, whether it's from the mechanics, whether it's from the functionality, and you have to continue to evolve it. So your first solution may not be what your ultimate product is going to be, but you have to continue to iterate, which means, let's say the first patent that you may write, but you have to continue down and revise it, put a second one down, if you truly believe that there's value and that you're going to have an impact. So these things take a long, and then finally is don't get discouraged when other people don't see what you see, because many times, as I said, people are resistant to change, they're reluctant. So you have to persist, take this out long term. And if you persist and you're really committed and you believe that something you can make an impact, you need to pursue that. You can't just sit there, write on a paper napkin, give it to somebody, expect them to pursue that for you. It's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. So being persistent, just really believing in yourself, your own vision, even if others don't have that buy-on right away, and being willing, like you said, to invest, to first of all, really making sure that what you're going after is something that you're willing to commit to long-term through the ups and the downs. And then just having that perseverance to stick with it and see it
and
through.
There's a lot of failure. You're going to have to accept failure, and because not everyone is going to be a home run. So just because you fail once doesn't mean it happened. I remember my neighbor to the south of me, Dick DeVos, he started Amway, and he never went to college. He was a master marketer, but he had 3 businesses that went bankrupt before he hit on Amway. And I chatted with him. He wrote a book. Unfortunately passed away. But historically, you have to look back at that and say, many of these people have failed before, and they learn from failure. So even if the first one doesn't work, you have to believe that what you're doing matters and that you have to be persistent with it. But also, if things fail, try again, because curiosity and innovation are important. If society and people say status quo is good enough, it never is. Once you start and life is flat and you accept things as they are, everything deteriorates. Unless you're continuing to improve, you're going backwards, and we have to continue to improve.
Yeah, exactly. I say that too. It's like there's no such thing as just standing still or status quo.
Is
right.
no good.
If you're not increasing, if you're not advancing, you're going backwards. You're decreasing, declining.
There is no such thing as a flat line when it comes to life and growth. You either got to be iterating and doing this direction, or you're going south.
Yeah.
That is important. And that's good for your mind too.
It
makes you work, makes you think, makes you read, makes you try to, improve your life and the people around you.
Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you. Thank you so much. Your career is fascinating. And this talk has been a masterclass in curiosity, courage, and conviction. Thank you for sharing your insights and incredible journey with us today.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm sorry if I'm a little long-winded, but
no, there's so much to talk about. It's very, very interesting. And for listeners who want to learn more about Relieve or Bonutti Technologies or your latest innovations, where can they find out more?
They can always email me. My name, P or Peter at Bonutti.net. So P at BONUTTI.net. Happy to chat and always try to help an innovator if they're interested, give them some ideas. Okay.
Okay, great. For our audience, if you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.